Hey everyone, my name is Zach. I'm a 23-year-old competitive boulderer from Canada, currently living in Montreal. Welcome back to the COMPCLIMB training series, where I record most of my training, provide in-depth analysis of every session, and just chat about climbing with an emphasis on competition. So we have a banger episode for today. Man, this video is going to be jam-packed with absolutely epic boulders. And so the first obvious theme of the epic boulders we're going to see today is that we're getting on the Olympic set at Bloc. So at the time I'm recording this video, the Olympics has just ended like a couple days ago, and riding the hype of climbing in the Olympics, of course, the setting team had a really fun idea to take the whole island, this big sector of wall in the gym, strip it, and just set like super epic, well thought out, finely crafted Olympic style boulders. So you can see we have like a 5 zone, a 10 zone, and then the 25. And you can tell that the idea with these boulders is, well, first of all, the difficulty is just like scaled. Obviously, they're not quite Olympic difficulty level, but we can have like boulders from V5 to V10, and they're all what they would be in an Olympic style. So for the most part, you can notice we're trying like some longer boulders just because they need to be able to have a 5 zone and a 10 zone and a 25 and achieve some separation between the moves. So naturally the boulders are just longer, like they are in the Olympics usually. And you can tell they put like a lot of effort and try hard into these boulders. On some of the harder ones later, the setters were really good at forcing some moves. And you can tell they really took their time with blocking holds that needed to be blocked and just trying to come up with cool creative moves. And for the most part, these Olympic boulders fit perfectly into this morning session that we're having. It is our slab and coordination session, and most of the boulders are going to be either coordination or slab boulders. I make a little bit of exception for a few boulders in this morning session because for the most part, I'd say there are more powerful boulders up in the gym right now that I have to work on, and so I have to try a couple power boulders in this morning session, but for the majority, we stick to coordination and slab, and we have our Boulder Max 4 session as session 2, where we try the physical stuff. And so this boulder here is our first great example of the setters really cooking and putting the effort in to try and force this move. So this one is by Chris, I believe, and Chris is all about setting paddles. He especially loves campus paddles, and he's been really working hard at trying to fine-tune his paddle craft and really trying to find good ways to force the moves and trying to avoid ways to break the boulders, like such as going foot first or not having to paddle your way through a move. And he's been really nailing it recently, especially. Sometimes some of the climbers are able to break their way through the paddles, but I was really trying to find a way to break that campus paddle on this one, and it was like nothing was coming to me. I didn't even want to try anything. The campus paddle felt really natural and really intuitive, and was like super satisfying to execute too. So that was a really, really fun one, and definitely worthy of being an Olympic style boulder. So now we're going to move into a couple boulders here that maybe don't fit so naturally into the slab and coordination session. But like I was saying, there's just a lot of power boulders up in the gym, and I need to try some of them because there's not as much slab and coordination to go around today. So this V10 that we are trying now is pretty powerful on a light overhanging wall, and it's got some pretty fun moves. These slippers are pretty satisfying. After trying this boulder on my first attempt, I had to go run and tape my left wrist really quick because I got some TFCC stuff and this boulder was kind of bothering me. But anyway, with the tape, we're all good. And this last move is like definitely the crux of the boulder. I had to adjust my left foot to push a little bit more straight downwards, going up for that finish hold, because there was just so much force going through my body. I needed to make sure that the direction I was creating was really good. So I stood straight down on that hold and was able to do the crux move of that one, which was a pretty fun boulder. And then this V9 that we're going to try here ends up being the surprise hardest boulder of the session, at least for this morning session. This one has some pretty terrible crimps at the end of this boulder for the last sequence that were way worse than I was expecting them to be. So the name of the game with this boulder was using my lower body to my advantage. You can see I just like touched that left-hand crimp and immediately pop off the wall because it felt unholdable. And yeah, honestly, this is, I think, recently becoming one of my strengths as a climber, being able to use my hips, not only my hip mobility, but also the strength in my hips to help me overcome situations where I really can't hold on to holds. And I need to find a really strong, stable position with my hips to take weight off of my hands and basically make the holds, make myself a little bit lighter and able to hold the holds. So the way I'm doing this on this move is I really squeeze my heel and my other foot together to get my hips nice and close into the wall, take a lot of weight off. And then for this last move, I like sag really well into my shoulders and my lats, also to try and take a bit of the gripping power out of this scenario, because I was like really struggling to hold onto those terrible slopey crimps. But that was a really cool techie set that caught me off guard, and that's why I always try to get on all of the boulders in the gym, not just the very hardest looking ones, because you never know what boulders are going to catch you off guard or be anti-style and really make you think and try hard and learn. And that's my biggest training philosophy always. And then here we're getting on another Olympic set, and my goodness, are these boulders just so pretty. Like, they even are like mixing hold colors together, as you can see, that just take the aesthetics to the next level, as well as the creativity, because usually these holds don't get to be set with together. But yeah, also they did a great job at making the entirety of this Olympic set really accessible. So there are 4 boulders for the men's circuit and the women's circuit, and they're not graded. At least I didn't, you can see there's a little sign at the start of this boulder. Maybe it says something about the difficulty, but I didn't read it I didn't pay enough attention to it, at least. So my understanding was that the grades were random, and I just had to guess by the looks of the boulder how tricky that would be. So there was a good amount of moderate ones, but then we get to a boulder like this, and you can tell, okay, this slab boulder is not for the faint of heart, let's say. So this boulder is absolutely massive, and when I first saw it, I thought I was looking at 2 different boulders, and then I realized it was just one. So yeah, this one is really cool and probably my favorite from the Olympic set. Not only is it just like a very striking, cool boulder, but it's got some really nice moves, some really techie, tricky moves. And yeah, the first crux is definitely going to be this foot cross through, and this is also going to feature today's tip of the day. So for today's tip of the day, we're going to be talking about when we have to cross our feet through on slab and how we should position the foot that we're looking to transition onto. So the idea is pretty simple. As we can see, I'm crossing my left foot through, and I'm going to try and shift all my weight onto this slopey foothold. And the most optimal way to position your foot is to try and have your foot as perpendicular to the wall as possible. So if we have our foot a little bit too parallel, and let's say my heel was rotated a bit to the left and my left foot was basically facing in the same direction as my right foot, it's going to be very difficult for me to balance once I fully shift my weight over to the right and I'm just having all my weight on my left foot. If my left foot is pointing towards the right, that is not only, so, well, first of all, it's just an unstable position and not how we would want to go balance on that hold naturally. And the other benefit of trying to place our foot as perpendicular as possible is that this is just using like a core, like a fundamental slab technique that we should always try to go for when we're balancing with no hands and we're just standing on our feet. And the more perpendicular we stand on footholds, the more basically our heel is further away from the wall in this instance, and so is our calf, and so is our ankle. And so what this does is it allows us to obtain like this micro percentage of leaning towards the wall more, right? So if we were to exaggerate the scenario and say that our foot was twice as long and our heel was all the way back away from the wall, we would be really leaning in towards the wall, right? And it would be like really easy to balance in this scenario because our lever is leaning really into the wall rather than being pushed away from it. So when we turn our foot to be parallel to the wall, our heel and our ankle and our calf and our whole leg gets put closer to the wall, and we can't lean towards the wall as much because our base isn't as far away from it. So like the tip of the day honestly could just be to make sure you stand perpendicular, like with your foot perpendicular to the wall. And it's also just very important to do it on when you're like crossing your feet through, especially because it can be really easy to not think about this and try to just place your foot randomly on the next hold that you're going to. And oftentimes if you don't focus on it, it'll just end up being parallel to the wall, and then it'll be really difficult to balance when you shift your weight over. So be very conscious when you're doing a foot cross through move like this to place your foot perpendicular to the wall. And then once you shift your weight over and balance into that position, you can even focus on like leaning towards the wall, because now you're in a position where you get that micro bit more of lean and balance. So yeah, perpendicular feet to the wall in general is good for slab climbing, but it's important especially to remember it when you're doing foot cross through moves such as this. And that's today's tip of the day. So yeah, you can see I'm really realizing just how important it is to place my foot correctly. And even with this helpful technique, this transition in particular is really hard. And this is definitely one of my weaknesses in general, is these foot cross through sequences where we're not using our hands at all. And it's not a great weakness to have, honestly, because it's quite common in comp style bouldering. And so I definitely need to practice it more. And it's quite a common move as well. So I usually do get to practice on it a lot around the city. And I'm learning about it a lot too. So I'm definitely feel like I'm getting better. But anyway, the biggest crux of this boulder is definitely that foot jump move into the arête. This move is pretty high up, and while it looks like decently secure, I definitely am just praying that my left foot comes and lands on that foothold when I do the jump. And if it misses, I'm gonna eat it on that move. So definitely have to hold my breath a bit on that one, but it is very satisfying when it finally lands on this attempt. And yeah, it's just hilarious how massive this boulder is. It barely fits in the frame of the camera. I'm sure my face is in the bottom corner of the screen right now so that we can see all of the holds. But yeah, it definitely felt like quite the adventure making your way up this boulder. And so I finally get to the end here, and these feet are like quite bad at the finish, and it's honestly perfect. The setters are like really making you go through a wave of emotions trying to finish this thing off. Your feet are tired from just doing a lot of slab climbing to get up to that point, and now you have to keep it together to maneuver these bad feet at the end, or you're gonna fall and have to do it all again. So that was definitely my favorite of the Olympic set, and honestly that would have been a great boulder to do like a comp simulation on, but we're not quite at that phase in the program. So I think I could maybe do that boulder in 5 minutes if I was really intentional about it, but it would definitely be really tricky and probably involve a lot of rapid firing attempts. But yeah, anyway, it was a good set. And then, yeah, we're like wrapping up the morning session, and I think, yeah, I finished off all of the Olympic set boulders, except for one of them, which I planned to save for the second session, which is our Boulder Max 4 session. And that is because it is a very powerful looking boulder, and it looks like it could be potentially the hardest. I couldn't tell if it was going to be harder than the campus coordination boulder. But anyway, I decided to save it for the second session. So we're going to finish off this first one with a really satisfying V7 slab. And I also want to note with our sessions recently, I kind of forget to talk about this sometimes, but it's an important thing to note, especially for anyone who's like starting a new training plan that's like physically intense and like basically entering, grind mode rather than just chillaxing and bouldering around. My sessions are like really fluctuating in terms of how I feel recently. Like in the past week since we've been on this new program, and I've been really grinding out some heavy duty workouts, lots of campusing and strength training. I definitely have more bad sessions, or it's not even like bad or good. There's just a lot of variety and nuanced differences in how I feel session to session. And it's just because we're really breaking the body down right now, and our body's trying to recover and rebuild the muscles that we've been breaking down, which really leads to a lot of fluctuation in how I feel from session to session. And if you experience something similar, just know that it's normal. And the way that we try to achieve consistency is the word I meant to say, with like feeling good all the time in our sessions. That's where the tapering comes in when we're making a program. So basically we cut down our volume and we just stick to bouldering sessions rather than doing lots of workouts and lots of campus training. And yeah, we lower the volume and the frequency of our training, and that basically helps us achieve consistency and feeling good all the time. But that's like we're trying to target that portion of our training for around the World Cup time, right? So these few weeks of training that we're doing now are basically meant to be varying in how we're feeling, and that's by design, because we're trying to build the strength and the power now, and then translate it into performance and consistency around comp time. So yeah, that's just an important thing to note, and something I want to remind all of us about as the training goes on, because this is a very important thing to understand if you're trying to train long term for events or whatnot, or for a whole season. And oftentimes those who forget this idea and get really frustrated by their performance in like a high volume training phase or like a grindy training phase can get really discouraged, and that can lead to burnout. So always keep this idea in mind. But anyway, let's talk about this boulder. So this one is the last Olympic set that I have left to try, and it is very powerful looking, as you can see. And I got a pretty cool flash of this one. So I was chatting to the setter later, and he was saying, oh yeah, that one's probably like the hardest boulder in the gym. And I said, what, really? I flashed it. And he was very surprised and impressed. But that being said, I didn't do a hand flip move at the end. We were meant to kind of catch the arete dynamically, whereas I just reached up to the purple hold. So that definitely made it easier than what it was supposed to be, probably. But anyway, that was like a really good flash. I definitely like struggled my way up that boulder. It was really hard and powerful and really cool. And it is also important to note during this session that I was feeling really strong. So we're talking about variety, or we're talking about like fluctuation and how I'm feeling. This was a high note. And yeah, it makes sense too, because it's been about a week and a half since the rest week. So I have a bit of the freshness. Like I have a little bit of freshness, but also my body's being broken down at the same time. So anyway, it just kind of coincidentally, I randomly hit like a strong feeling session today. Whereas the morning was okay. It was kind of meh. And some of our sessions recently have been meh. But yeah, I was feeling really strong in this second session of bouldering. So it was really good that it was a Boulder Max 4 session and we could put the strength to the test. Now this boulder that we're trying, it was very good that I was feeling strong, because this thing is hard. This one was a lot harder than it looked. Honestly, the crux of this boulder is kind of starting it. This left-hand crimp is really bad. It's like really slopey, and the position to like set a toe hook is really awkward. So you see that I drop my foot down to smear, and that allows me to be in a better position to set a heel hook instead, actually. And if you notice, I am wearing a Tomoa on my left foot in order to stand on this little foothold to do this move off the crimp. And that's because my flagships are at the point where they're like getting really soft now. Like I've been training in them a lot, and it's been summer too, so they've been like really breaking down, and there's no hole in them yet, but they're just like ultra soft and really can't stand on small feet like that anymore. So it's important that I have my Tomoas always on hand. So anyway, let's check this boulder out. So you may recognize this boulder. We tried it in our episode at Rose Bloc a little while ago, and it was the one boulder of the episode, I think, that I was not able to do. And this one is super epic. So obviously you see me doing this crazy campus double clutch paddle at the top of this steep wall. I never tried this beta in the last episode we were trying this boulder, and I knew it existed. But I thought, surely there's no way that I can do this crazy paddle move at the top of this comp boulder. It just looks too wild. But I finally decided to try it today. And man, this is another example of Chris, the setter, doing an absolutely amazing job at forcing this paddle. I was really trying to break this thing on the first day we were trying it. I was trying to toe hook the undercling and keep the toe hook to go up to the second last hold. I tried to just hold the span move from the crimp to the second last, but it was all fruitless, and it led me to actually trying the paddle today, and the paddle is just the best way. Now that being said, it is definitely massive and sketchy, and I so desperately stick it on this attempt because it's also blind. So at the last second you see it and you snag it, and when I was holding that finish hold, my right hand was opening up and I was like ready to just face plant, but I got a super clutch send of this one. And listen, that one it's definitely in contention for the best Rose Bloc boulder of all time that I've climbed. That one was really sick, and it was also just extra sick because Chris did such a good job at forcing that move, which I tried so hard to break. But I had some really cool flows on that. A crazy double clutch campus move that felt too epic and too crazy to actually do. But after kind of committing to it, it was able to go. So yeah, shout out to Chris if you're watching for potentially the best boulder I've ever climbed in this gym. Super sick. And yeah, this, you can tell I'm like feeling really strong in this session, and I'm having like a really good sending streak right now. We're able to put down a lot of very powerful boulders. We've only been trying absolutely physical, strengthy style boulders in this session. And at this point, I'm in an interesting spot where I am absolutely cooked because trying power boulders for this long really zaps the body, but I'm still feeling like really strong in the session. So I decided to start trying this boulder, which is one of the newest sets at the gym, and I haven't got on yet. And this thing had a really cool sequence. I'm not sure who set this one, but whoever did was cooking on this one. Coming back down to this right-hand undercling to bump up left again, super cool. And I think maybe it's on this attempt, yes it is, that I find this left heel hook to help me out with this move. But yeah, all of these holds are quite slopey, and this one was really hard. And it was also very helpful that I was feeling strong in order to be able to do this one. And then check out this jump move here. I was actually really having to focus on the tip of the day from the last episode, where we are jumping between two holds that are facing the same direction. And I really had to treat that left hand that I'm jumping to as a Gaston, and basically use my thumb as a Gaston in this scenario and sort of oppose the force of my right arm in order to achieve a stable position. Otherwise, just jumping between these holds and pulling on them sideways would rip me right off the wall, right? So I really have to treat this left hand as a Gaston and pull myself to the right and really keep a stable feeling position. And yeah, we move into this really fire sequence. I'm like trying real hard on this attempt because I'm like gassing out, but I still have a bit of strength in my system. And I especially really want to send this boulder because if I do so, which it's looking pretty good, and spoiler, yes, we do. It's been a long time. Like, I don't even remember the last time I actually sent every boulder in rows block up in the gym at one time, and we achieved that today. Super satisfying. Pretty much no boulder above V8 was left undone in the gym, so we managed to tick everything off, and that is super satisfying. And yeah, so that wrapped up a really awesome day of training at rows block, and I don't actually know what kind of training I'm going to be doing tomorrow. I will fast forward to future Zach and we'll talk about whatever the next day of training is going to look like. So here we are for the next day of training, and usually our normal session 1 on day 2 of training is our campus session and pinch block session. But as you can see, we are not looking at a campus session right now, and we're fast forwarding straight to the pinch block session. And that is because we're not going to be doing our day of campus today. And the logic behind this is the last day of training of phase 1 of this very intense training program, and we're about to move into phase 2. So phase 1 is 2 weeks long, and phase 2 is also 2 weeks long. Now, I like to take a rest week once a month, and a rest week for me is about 5 days. And what I do is I do this like all the time. Once a month, I take a 5-day rest week. So I'm very accustomed to this training regimen, and my body really needs a rest week like once a month. And so 4 weeks for like 4 weeks straight of training is actually on the high end for me. And I'm going to be really getting tired in that 4th week of training. So what I like to do is I basically like to do a bit of a pit stop halfway through like a full month of training and schedule in a 2-day of rest. So it's kind of like a mini rest week, but really not invasive on the training. Whereas when I take a 5-day rest week, that's like kind of I really have to come back from that, and it takes a few days to readjust to training volume and whatnot. But 2 days off is no problem. I can come back to training like it's normal. And what it does is it gives me a nice extra boost of rest and freshness. And halfway through a 4-week like month of training, you know, like after the first 2 weeks of phase 1 and right before the first 2 weeks of phase 2 is a really good refueling point. And this is a really key and important part of training. And this is where like really being able to look at your training from a big picture and over like longer periods of time is really helpful, because you can basically know when you need to schedule in these little pit stops of rest and refueling days. And so I'm saying all this, and you may be wondering, okay, well, why are we doing any training at all today? So we're not doing the campus session, and the reason is because we're basically like kind of creating a 2-day rest for myself. So today we're not actually doing any climbing training, and then tomorrow is my rest day. So in a sense, it's kind of like 2 days off of climbing for me, which is going to feel like I know my body, and I know that's going to feel like a nice bit of rest and break from all the climbing and the intense bouldering. And I know that it's going to help give me an edge of freshness and also heal up my skin, which has been getting pretty pink recently. But I have, like, since we kind of had our fun month, like last month, and I was doing like no workouts whatsoever, I really don't want to eliminate this day of training completely, because I want to keep my routine of workouts like going. Like, I've been on a nice, steady, consistent regimen with my workout, and I really feel like I'm actually pushing my weights and pushing my level higher. Whereas like the inconsistency in our workouts in the past couple months, it's been really difficult to maintain progress and incrementally increase the amount of weight that I'm doing for every exercise. So I really don't want to interrupt that process by taking off this whole day of training completely. I'd be skipping a whole workout, and we would like not do a workout for like 5 days or something. And ideally, what I would have done is write out my training program a bit better. So I should have wrote my training month as, okay, we do the first 2 weeks of phase 1 and schedule in like a 2 days of rest, and then do the next 2 weeks of phase 2. And then after that month of training, like after those 4 weeks, we have a rest week. But I didn't. And I kind of just forgot about it. And I wrote out 4 weeks of training back to back, phase 1 and phase 2 back to back, without a 2 day of rest in between. And I have already like scheduled some things and made some commitments. So now I can't simply just, do this day of training with a climbing session and then add 2 days of rest in between, because I have like scheduled some things. And if I were to push everything back by adding a rest day, it would just get messed up. So that's why I have to like kind of do a makeshift 2 days of rest. But anyway, that was kind of like a long explanation for a pretty basic idea, which is my prescription, I guess you could say, or just recommendation for most people would be to try to take like some sort of rest week once a month, like 3 to 5 days off. And even within that month of training, have at least 1 2-day rest. Usually around the halfway mark is good. I find this is a really fantastic formula for like long-term training and like just creating a whole training program in general. Rest week with a frequency of once a month, and then at least 1 2-day rest within that training month. And so I kind of forgot about this while I was writing out my training program. And now I had to kind of have a makeshift rest day where we skip our day of campusing. But it's good. It honestly, like, we did a lot of working out, but honestly, bouldering is the most tiring form of training. So while I did all of this workout stuff and even my hangboard and pinch block, I kind of felt like really relaxed throughout the whole day, and it was really chill not to do any climbing, and it felt like a rest day. And so it's going to be nice. I'm basically having this nice bit of refueling as we are about to tackle the second phase of our training. And man, even just this first phase really flew by. We got some really good training in. This was definitely the highest volume of training we're going to be doing on this whole program. We had to do like the big workout every time. And when we switch up into phase 2 of training, we're going to be doing a bit more performance training, some 5-on, 5-off stuff, and a little bit less volume with all our strength workouts and hangboard and stuff. But I'll probably do a bit of a tiny program breakdown in the next episode as we start phase 2 of training. So anyway, that's the end of the episode. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Insert Kaji video outro here.